Wang, replying to Supervising Secretary Guo. At your high tower, the last light fades on pairs of gates. Peaches and plums cast shade as willow catkins dance. In the offices, an evening bell sounds. In the chancellery, few work, only birds chatter. At dawn, jade pendants chiming, you hurry to the golden hall. At dusk, with imperial edicts, you leave through the lacquered door. I would like to serve there with you, but old age prevents me. Now I will take to my sickbed and set aside my official robes. So here we are with the last of the 4 heptasyllabic regulated poems that are included in this anthology as belonging to Wang. Like most of the poems that he wrote in this section and that were included here, it's a court poem. It's not like the previous one. This is very similar perhaps to his first one here, the Harmonizing Secretariat Drafter Gia's poem. It's a poem describing and answering back a text by somebody else, and that somebody else is an important fellow civil servant who is working in the imperial administration. In this case, this is Supervising Secretary Guo Chenggu, who served as a policy reviewer in the imperial chancellery, which was a post that Wang Wei also occupied from 754 to 755, which establishes in a way a limiting time for when this poem could have been composed, at least a lower bound. And the poem, as I said, is quite similar to the one about Secretary Drafter Gia. We get a depiction of the friend in his courtly surroundings, doing his clerical and secretarial jobs, with the background of the imperial palace and its constructions and buildings. So the main topic, so this is again a rather artificial subgenre, if you wish. This is describing the work, the hard work at court of a scholar official, and it has an element of flattery always in it, and depicting the high position, but also the conscientiousness and hard work ethics of Secretary Guo. This does include an element that was not present in the other poem, which is the ideal of retirement, which is here quite explicitly stated in the last couplet, more than as ideal, as an inevitable fact for the scholar official based on the fact that he is old and sick. So scholar officials, once they were too sick to serve in office, stopped serving, although a lot of the times this was an excuse used by scholar officials who either did not like the government and did not want to continue serving in it, or, scholar officials that really assumed the discourse of the retired gentleman scholar, that ideal, and who decided to quit office. But I imagine these would have been not that many. The first case would have been more prevalent. Okay, so let's take a look, as we usually do, at the poem couplet by couplet. First couplet. At your high tower, the last light fades on pairs of gates. Peaches and plums cast shade as willow catkins dance. So the first couplet locates us, as usual, spatially and temporally. So Supervising Secretary Guo has to work at court inside the imperial palace complex. Where exactly he works doesn't remain clear from this first couplet. I mean, he works at the secretariat, but he's probably at the disposition of the emperor in any of the pavilions or halls where the emperor might lie. And the first image shows us a high tower. It doesn't reference directly Guo, but we can imagine that Guo is meant to be inside that tower and is meant to be seeing what the first couplet describes. And what does the first couplet describe? We have a high tower. It's the end of the day, it's evening, and the last light of the day is fading on pairs of gates. Where are these pairs of gates? Well, probably they are gates that can be seen from the tower. maybe some of the gates that lead inside the imperial palace, the imperial precincts. Perhaps they are the gates at the foot of the high tower. This wouldn't be unusual. Many Chinese constructions had, a big archway with gates at the bottom and some constructions on the top, some pavilions or buildings on top of the gates. But anyway, the idea is the scholar official to whom this poem is dedicated, for which this poem is a reply, is imagined as being on top of his tower, looking out as the evening is coming, seeing the last rays of sunlight caressing, touching, illuminating the gates of the tower, or the gates, some beautiful towered gates of the imperial palace. And the second line in the same couplet paints us what he sees, the natural sights, because the imperial palace complex, apart from buildings, it included extensive gardens and flowering trees. Peaches and plums cast shade as willow catkins dance. The sun is setting, the trees are casting a shade, the willow catkins are flying. This clearly indicates the season. It's spring, which is when willow catkins fall and float from the trees. Second couplet. So the second couplet seems to expand the gaze to the imperial palace. The two images in the second couplet are oral images. They're about sounds. The first couplet was about sights. The second couplet is about sounds, and probably sounds coming from different areas of the imperial precinct, which Secretary Guo might visit or work on, but where perhaps he is not right now at the moment. Perhaps he is hearing these sounds from afar. In the offices, an evening bell sounds. In the chancellery, few work, only birds chatter. So it's late evening. The bell that tolls inside the palace is probably the evening bell, indicating that most of the civil servants have to vacate the palace, that, the gates are probably going to be closed soon, and that except those civil servants who spend an all-night watch at the palace, all others should go home. And in the chancellery, the main office at which Secretary Guo works, there's not too many people around. Probably he's not seeing them, but he can hear the lack of human-made noises, and only, the orioles, the birds chattering, another indicator of spring. So two sounds, a human and a natural one, the evening bell and the chattering birds in the offices or in the palace and in the chancellery. So the surroundings of Secretary Guo have been expanded from his high tower to other imperial palace buildings, and the visual elements have been juxtaposed with oral elements, with sounds. Okay, the third couplet, which is the second parallelistic couplet, moves us away from the strict present of Secretary Guo. It shows us what he is doing from dusk till dawn, from morning till night. And that matches very well, that helps to organize very well this parallelistic couplet. Golden hall, lacquered door, dawn, dusk, jade pendants, imperial edicts, hurry, leaving. So, the parallelism is pretty obvious in the couplet. At dawn, jade pendants chiming, you hurry to the golden hall. At dusk, with imperial edicts, you leave through the lacquered door. So this couplet really summarizes the day-to-day business of Secretary Guo. He comes, like most civil servants, early in the morning, wearing his court regalia, which includes jade pendants that Confucian scholars were supposed to wear. And they make this jingle-jangle noise, cling, 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 while the supervising secretary is moving around. He moves quickly to the Golden Hall, which is presumably one of the halls of the palace where the emperor might be and where he is going to attend to the emperor's orders, instructions, wishes. Hurrying, because you're not meant to walk slowly in the imperial presence. You're meant to hurry up about your business. And, he does all his business, and at dusk, when the day is over, just like the previous figure, Secretariat drafter Jia had to draft edicts on 5-colored paper. Secretary Guo is taking the imperial edicts. He has collected them, he or others have written them down, and now he is leaving through the lacquered doors of the palace, of the secretariat perhaps. He's taking them to wherever they have to be sent to or stored. So up to now, the first three couplets have shown us the busy and palatial, the busy life of a scholar official, of a relatively middle high-ranking scholar official, with the background of the imperial palace and its buildings and structures. Now, the last couplet makes a little twist. Generally, the last couplet, as you know, is usually a synthesis or a distillation of the quintessence of the message of the poem. But here we have, a slight change of focus. So Wang Wei moves the camera from Secretary Guo to himself and makes, an apology for not being in office at that moment in spite of his wishes. I would like to serve there with you, but old age prevents me. Now I will take to my sickbed and set aside my official robes. So in the last couplet, Wang Wei is actually saying, I'm too old, I'm too sick to serve. I would like to serve, but I cannot do it properly now. So I'm going to retire. I'm going to leave office. So it's interesting. The reason for quitting office in this poem is not presented as a desire to search for Taoistic or Buddhist truths and getting rid of the dust of the world. It's just I can't. I'm too old. I can't do the job properly. I might not like not being able to serve at court, but I have to resign myself. You can keep working there. I cannot. So there isn't an element of, in this poem, of complaining about the red dust of the world or of courtly service. There rather seems to be a slightly envious tone of, I wish I were like you. I wish I could serve like you. Although, of course, this could be attributed just to flattery or when you're writing a poem like this about a court officer serving at court and answering his poem, you're supposed to match the tone. If Wang Wei was at the same time writing a poem to a hermit whom he is going to visit, the tone of the poem would be very different, and Wang Wei's possible entry into retired life would be painted with a different color. Okay, so this is all for today. This is the poem. I've read two other versions of this poem which I've encountered in the internet. And, we can read them very quickly now just for comparison, but they're very similar. The main difference, the tone, the content, everything is the same. The main difference is that the first couplet seems to be a bit ambiguous or a bit unspecific about the construction on which policy reviewer Guo is standing or inside, and where the gates might be that are referenced to in that first line. So, for example, in this version, it goes as follows. In response to policy reviewer Guo, by the twin gates' tall tower, clouds and lingering glow. Peach and plum trees are dense and dark, willow catkins fly. Inside the palace, a distant bell. In the offices, it is late. Within the ministry, calling birds, officials now are scarce. Mornings, waving jade pendants, you rush to the golden hall. Evenings, receiving imperial edicts, you call at the carved palace doors. I would try to follow you, but there is no way not to age, and soon, because of illness, I'll discard my court robes. So interesting, in this version of the poem, the retirement of Wang Wei is projected into the future. So he is still serving, but he will have to stop serving probably in the near future, whereas in the poem, in the version we have just read, it seems that Wang Wei has already definitely quitted office. Another version, this is by Witter Bynner, who made a translation of the 300 Tang poems. I think it was in the 60s or 70s, maybe. Harmonizing a poem by palace attendant Guo. High beyond the thick wall, a tower shines with sunset, where peach and plum are blooming and the willow cotton flies. You have heard in your office the court bell of twilight. Birds find perches, officials head for home. Your morning jade will tinkle as you thread the golden palace. You will bring the word of heaven from the closing gates at night. And I should serve there with you, but being full of years, I have taken off official robes and am resting from my troubles. So this one seems more coincidental with the translation we have just read, although again, in the first line, there is beyond the thick wall, a tower shining. Beyond the thick wall, it doesn't seem to be present, any thick wall, in the two versions that we've just read. But anyway, there is, as you always know in Chinese classical poetry, a great degree of ambiguity and interpretation.